يا هلا 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 حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا يا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا يا هلا ويا هلا ويا
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the program. It is a gorgeous Saturday morning and time for you and I to get together on Let's Talk. We will be together till 10 o'clock this morning and three amazing ladies in the studio with us. We're going to be looking at issues around Johannesburg water. We're also going to talk to Yvonne Fenter from Four Paws. They focus on the care of domestic and farm animals. And we'll be wrapping up by talking to Dr. Kerrigan McCarthy. She is from the Centre of Communicable Diseases. The focus will be on measles, malaria and other such diseases. Our summer months have started and of course we need to be a lookout on communicable diseases, very especially if you're going to be holidaying in very remote areas. So all of that on the show. Lines will be open. We're waiting to hear from you. We always love you to keep us company and share your thoughts live on the show. But right now we introduce our first guest to you, our esteemed viewers. She is Eleanor Mavimbela and she is from Johannesburg Water. Eleanor, good morning. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Lovely to have you here. And I've always wondered from the time I was a little girl and I opened up the tap and appreciated the abundance of God's blessings, but always wondered about this whole process, how we are blessed to, at the touch or return of a tap, be able to enjoy this amazing luxury, and that is water. So let's look at Johannesburg water and Rand water. There's a relationship there and how the water comes to us on tap. What's the process involved?
Well, it's quite a lengthy process, and what happens is that we as Johannesburg Water buy our water from Rand Water. So Rand Water is the one that will then extract water from the dams. In the city of Johannesburg, we get our water from the Vaal Triangle. So it's the Vaal Dam as well as two other dams. So we have a storage dam, where that's for emergencies. And then, but the Rand Water would get their water from the Vaal Dam, and once they get their water from the Vaal Dam, then they would treat it. So they would treat it to drinkable quality. So once that is done, then we would buy it from them, and then we would store it in our tanks that we call our reservoirs and towers. So in each region in the city of Johannesburg has their own reservoir and towers where they feed from to get the water in the taps. So we've got over 12,000 kilometers of pipelines in the city of Johannesburg.
Wow.
Where we reticulate basically that's our distribution channels to your tap. So once we open the water from the reservoirs, it would go through the 12 kilometers of pipe, which we're talking about over 2 million joints that are happening within the city. So then that's how you would then get water into your tap. So it's quite
a huge operation. I should imagine a logistical nightmare at times. What we've also noticed over the past couple of seasons and summers for that matter is we've had water shortages, we've had water shutdowns in Johannesburg proper, and I think everything we're discussing here would apply to other municipalities and other cities throughout the country, because I should imagine the infrastructure operates in a similar way all around the country. But when we have these water shutdowns and we get notices saying that you won't be getting water in a certain area for 12 or 24 hours. What's going on there, and why is it that the water towers or the reservoirs run dry? What goes on that happens? Do you not have a backup plan to prevent that from happening?
So what happens especially when it's something that we usually try our best to explain to our consumers, that when reservoirs and towers run dry and there's no burst pipe in the area, it's usually due to a high water demand. So sometimes we have a reservoir, a tower feeding into an area. There's a certain amount of water that we are supplying to that area. So sometimes you get that the demand outweighs the supply that we can give in a certain area. At the moment, we throughout the world, the best practice for amount of water per capita per day, per person per day, is in the region of 118 liters per day. But in the city of Johannesburg, it's double that amount. It's almost triple the amount. It's over 300 liters a day per person.
Do we know why?
Is
it wastage?
It's the demand. That's why we try our best to educate people with regards to using water wisely. That's why you sometimes, that's like going back to your question, that's why sometimes you get your reservoirs running dry, due to the demand that we're getting, the demand outweighing the supply that we as Johannesburg Water can supply to
But apart from the demand, there's also issues, and this is ongoing, because the infrastructure is aging, piping, etc. And of course, there's maintenance issues as well. So you have issues around burst water pipes and so forth. So that too impacts on our supply.
That too does impact. So what we've had, when about 2 years ago, we started a program called the Pipe Replacement Program, where we're trying to replace at least about 2 to 3% of the old pipeline per year, per annum, which costs us quite a lot of money, but we've seen the return on investments already, because it's reduced the amount of pipe bursts in a lot of areas within the city of Johannesburg. So we're happy with the progress of that program. So we're still rolling out that program, and which is obviously dependent on the amount of the budget that we get. Also, we also need to do maintenance in order for people to get water on. To be able to get water all the time, it's important that we also do maintenance. So we don't want to to find ourselves in a place where our infrastructure is failing us because we haven't done maintenance. So sometimes that we do, and we do send out notices 7 days prior to residents affected that, we want to do maintenance of our pipeline in a certain area. We need to isolate, we need to shut down water for a certain amount of hours to do maintenance. Unfortunately, that's a necessary evil, if you like to call
Obviously,
it. Yeah.
and this has to happen on an ongoing basis. Otherwise, we all come unstuck. Not only as Johannesburg Water, but we, the residents, will suffer the consequences as well. Let's look at the issue around how closely you work with the weather services. Very especially in the summer months, because if you don't, you're not able to plan adequately. Would I be correct in thinking that, though?
That's quite correct. We just sent out a statement actually earlier in the week, where we were pleading with the residents of Johannesburg that, from what from the intelligence that we've gathered from the weather service, we're only gonna get good rain only in January 2018. Ooh. So, and as you've noticed, the temperatures are increasing. It's actually quite hot. It's very, very warm at the moment. So when it's very warm, the demand in water actually has started to go up at an alarming rate. It's actually starting to worry us. So we sent out a statement pleading with residents to please use water sparingly. Also, we wanted to remind residents that we're still under level 1 restrictions. You're only allowed to water your garden after 6 p.m. in the evening until 6 a.m. the next morning. We're trying to reduce the water demand. We need to reduce the water demand until we get good rains. That's only going to happen in January 2018.
Do you think we as Johannesburg residents are just downright wasteful? Because these warnings have been around for the past couple of summers, pleading for the residents to conserve water. And yet we seem to, the demand from Johannesburg Water hasn't lessened on the residents. That warning is still in place. Do you think we're just careless consumers?
I wouldn't say careless consumers, but I think people are of the view that, okay, as long as I can open my tap and water is flowing.
And I'm paying for it.
that means everything is fine. What are they talking? What is Johannesburg Water saying? Because I can see the water coming out of my taps. It's only when last year when we really had we were really strict on the level 2 restrictions that people started heeding the call. They were like, actually, this thing is, when we started actually shutting down water during certain times of the day, then they actually took the message seriously and they took it home. Like, you know what, this thing is real. And with what's happening in Cape Town, I think people are now waking up to the fact that, you know, this water restriction thing is actually real. And I don't think people want what's happening in Cape Town to happen. What's happening to happen in the city of Johannesburg as well.
Now, I know that you're based at the city of Johannesburg, but I have no doubt that you have your ear close to the ground as to what is going down in Cape Town as far as their water situation is concerned. And we know it is dire. It's going to have a huge impact on the holiday season, the Western Cape. Do you know that? Do you perhaps have any idea how they're going to be catering for the influx of visitors over the festive period this year?
Well, I can't necessarily speak for the city of Cape Town, but I do know that at the moment they've actually gone up to level 5 restrictions. And I think that then the message has been quite stern with regards to the water usage in the city. And I think at best it's a message that everybody within the country should be heeding, as to start to take cognizance of the amount of water that you use.
Is there any way that other municipalities around the country are able to assist Cape Town with their water situation? Or is it just not viable at all?
At the moment, I'm not too sure as to how it is, but I don't think there is a viable way that we could be able to assist another city or
there's no piping going, connecting up to the different municipalities?
Unfortunately not. But I know, for instance, in the city, within the Gauteng province, it works a bit differently, because it's City of Tshwane's it's a Kuruleni municipality, Mogale City, as well as City of Johannesburg. We buy our water from Rand Water. So in that regard, then our pipeline are quite close, centralized and close to each other. So what happens at Rand Water affects all the municipalities within the Gauteng province. So in that context, yes, we could be able to basically assist each other here and there. But with regards to outside of the province, no, I don't think there's
not that far away.
No, we wouldn't be able to.
Okay, let's go for our first ad break. We do need to continue this very important discussion. We need to be looking at school children. We need to look at your role and my role as a householder and how we can collectively make a difference. We're talking to Johannesburg Water, and I think this is a very important discussion. We need to listen very closely and attentively to the strong messages that Ellen is going to share on the show this morning, and we all as Muslims have to take heed of this very dire warning from Johannesburg Water, because if we don't start conserving and using water in a more respectful manner, then we're going to find ourselves in a very dire situation, and we don't need to look very far down the line. Cape Town is a good example of what's going down, so let us be more responsible, let us be more Muslim. Time for an ad break. When we get back, we're continuing our talk with Johannesburg Water, and do remember, lines are open. Call in and share your comments with us.
We are the Muslim Ummah, and each day that goes by, the harder we try. In gratitude we pray to Allah, chosen as part of the best of mankind. We spread the word of Islam, spread the word, spread the word.
Jafmed Pharmacy. We are an exciting new pharmacy in your area. Come and visit us for all your acute and chronic prescriptions. We are contracted to all medical aids, open till 10 p.m. daily, and we deliver. Call us on 021 703 9791.
So Mom's Kitchen needs a container makeover. Something fun and colorful for the kids. Or maybe Dad's garage needs to get into shape. Just Plastics is the A to Z of local and exclusive imported plastic products and more, all under one roof. Get great value with a gift card or Red Rewards loyalty card and get rewarded for every purchase. Check out justplastics.co.za for great value, widest range, and right price.
Burger Rack brings fresh new flavor to the craft burger market. At Burger Rack, our burgers are made from scratch using the finest locally sourced ingredients. Juicy, all-natural beef patties with absolutely no preservatives or additives. Grilled on an open flame, then crafted wickedly to each individual order by our burger masters. We famous for our burgers, but there is more. Plain and simple. We do ribs, we do waffles, and we definitely build burgers. Burger Rack. Downtown vibe, uptown chow. Contact 072 444 4770.
Allah, 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 Allah.
Are you importing or exporting products for your business? Why don't you contact Fourway for an innovative logistics solution? Sea, air, rail or road. Fourway has a solution for you.
Bismillah and welcome back. It's a Saturday morning and it's great to be with you. We're talking with Johannesburg Water about the situation in Johannesburg. We've touched on what's going down in Cape Town, and I think that's a lesson enough for us to start taking our water usage really very seriously. And of course, Eleanor from Johannesburg Water is here to talk to us about the situation. Eleanor, just for the record, what is your role at Johannesburg Water?
Well, I'm the external communications officer, but currently I'm acting as the marketing and communications manager for Johannesburg Water.
So you are the to-go person as far as information is concerned.
Yes.
Information dissemination to the general public.
Definitely.
Brilliant. Now, we touched on the dire situation in Cape Town. You've talked to us about our water sources, suggesting that it comes from the Vaal Dam and two other dams. What's happening at Hartbeespoort Dam and the serious situation with the hyacinth problem? Do we draw water from them at all?
With regards to Hartbeespoort Dam, that's where we had a problem with one of our wastewater treatment works. It's called the Northern Works. So basically, when we had a problem with the because
what was the problem?
The problem was that there was a leakage that happened with regards to wastewater, but that was soon sorted out as soon as we picked up the problem. So we had a problem with the pump stations there in that area.
Why do we have an overgrowth or the proliferation of hyacinths in that area? There was also there was a situation there where they had a clean-up project going to clean out the dam of all the hyacinths, but that seems to have come to a standstill. And how's that impacting on the dam as far as recreation is concerned and also water utilization?
I need to be clear that we basically we don't draw water from that dam. So for as far as I know, by the city of Johannesburg, we don't draw water from the dam. Dams are the responsibility of the Department of Water and Sanitation. The reason why there is such a problem in that area is because of the rapid population growth and development in that area. And as Johannesburg Water, we've also tried mitigating the problem with regards to extending our wastewater treatment so that we can be able to treat more wastewater than we used to before, because catering for the high dense population growth in that area.
Okay, so you wouldn't be aware of the issue around the growth of the hyacinth in the water. We'll probably try and get another expert to come and talk to us about that. But you've touched on something very important, the treatment of wastewater. I have always wondered about the sewage works around Gauteng area. What And I've also heard the treatment plants. You have specific treatment plants treating the sewage and the waste. Goodness me, please do not tell me that you treat the sewage waste and then that water comes back into our systems. I'm always worried and wondered about that. Please put me at rest.
Well, there's a general misconception that the water that you flushed and the toilet comes back to your tap, which is very far from the truth. So what would happen is that we collect wastewater about maybe 2 or 3 times a day. And what we do with that water is that we treat it. So we treat it to a point where it's not potable water quality. And what we mean by that is that it's not of drinking quality, but that we treat it to a point where we can release it back into the rivers and it's safe for release back into the rivers. But what would then happen is that then our nature would take its course from the rivers on. But you do not drink the water that you just flushed back and doesn't get recycled and come back into your taps.
And the sewage is not being pumped directly into rivers or into the ocean. It gets treated first and then it gets flushed back into the rivers.
Yes.
But what happens, how safe is it for it to go back into the rivers? I'm thinking rural communities. They are totally reliant on river water for their sustainability. Is it safe then for them to drink, use the water direct from the rivers?
Well, with regards to the city of Johannesburg, we don't necessarily have rural communities using water from rivers and etc. because we do also allocate them standpipes. So if, for instance, for informal settlements or informal suburbias, we do afford them suburban standpipes so that they can able to draw water from there. So safe drinkable water from there. So, but what happens is that we treat the water to such a quality that you can use the water to water your garden, for instance, but you can't drink it. Yes.
If people do want to drink water directly from the rivers, what is the safest way? What do they need to do to ensure that that water is of drinkable quality and it's not going to make them sick?
Well, experts have said that the best way is to make sure that that you boil the water, or even add a bit of jik into the water, just to ensure that the bacteria in the water has died before you, and make sure that it's cooled down before you drink the water, especially if it's from a river that you're not sure where the water is coming from.
Okay, let's get back to Johannesburg and our drinking water. And as we speak, I should imagine this is the general blueprint that is used around the country as far as waterworks is concerned. So our drinking water in South Africa, when we draw water from the tap, should we still be using some sort of filter system, or should we still be boiling our water before we drink it?
One of the things that we're really, really proud of as the city of Johannesburg Water, and we brag about it every chance that we get, is the quality of our drinking water. We've gotten an award from the Department of Water Sanitation, that it's a certification that they give out every 2 years or so, called the Blue Drop, and we've successfully been getting the Blue Drop from the past 3 or 4 times that they've given it out. So it's one of the things that we're really proud of. Our water is of a high standard. It's of high quality. It's of a high standard. Be proud of the fact that you can safely open the tap and drink water from it. Many countries can't even speak of such a thing.
But if somebody just wants to go the extra mile as far as precaution is concerned, they can go ahead and do it. They can boil it, or they can put a filter.
They can, but it's not necessary.
When one goes to your website, the thing that jumps out at you is something called war on leaks. That's a huge issue in the country, is it not?
Yes,
because
it is.
here you and I sitting and thinking, I've got a leaking tap, so what? It's not going to make a difference in the larger scheme of things. But you as Johannesburg Water have a different view on that. What is your viewpoint?
Our viewpoint is that the number of retrofitting or leaks that we can stop, it also it's one of the initiatives we're doing, because we feel that it can also play a part in reducing the water demand that we have in the city, and it's played quite a role. And I mean, at the moment we've had a campaign where, together with the Department of Water Sanitation and Rainwater, where we chose about the plan was to get 500 schools, but so far we've done about 105 schools within the city of Johannesburg, where we've retrofitted, fixed their leaks, and so forth. And we've seen the return on investments with regards to that campaign. We also have the Soweto project. I don't know if you know about it, but we've had that for over 10 years now, where we are affording the residents of Soweto the opportunity to call us in to retrofit so that we can also install a water meter. So we're fixing their leaks for free and things like retrofitting their houses so that we reduce the water demand that we're having within the city.
All right, let's take another ad break. We'll be back with you. And I want to talk about the importance and the encouragement for people who live on small holdings and homes in the suburbs with huge gardens that probably are thinking of going the borehole route. Is it allowed, and what are the protocols involved if you want to go that route? I'm talking to Eleanor from Johannesburg Water, a very important issue. We know what's playing out in Cape Town and in other parts of the world. We're also aware of the fact that we are a landlocked city. So if our water runs dry, or if our towers run dry, and if we don't get good rainfall, then we are going to be in a very, very serious and dire situation. Let's look at ways of how we can become more responsible, be more Muslim, and save this very, very precious commodity, and that is water. We'll talk some more about it right after the ad break. And we're talking about the importance of being water-wise, being responsible, and being more Muslim, and how we need to do everything possible to conserve this very, very precious commodity. Joburg Water is here, Eleanor, to talk to us about it. Now, Eleanor, back to you. We've covered a lot of important issues as far as conserving water is concerned. What about people who are wanting to install boreholes on their property? We know it's a very huge expense, but do you incentivize them at all? Do you encourage it in any way?
Johannesburg Water actually has a partnership with the Borehole Association of South Africa, where we come in on the basically on the marketing, on the PR side of it, where we've been going out with the to the residents of the city of Johannesburg and asking them that if you can afford to install a borehole, and if your water table is high enough, think about installing one. Actually, we big advocates for people to install boreholes if they can afford it, and if the water table is high enough. So we'd really encourage residents.
But you don't give any incentive in terms of some form of a discount if you install a water
We believe by installing the borehole, already you're getting a return on investment. For one, your property value goes up as soon as you have a borehole in your property. And the second thing is you get off the grid. So that means that then you're not using municipal water, then you pay less on your bill. So already those are two incentives that you're getting.
I've been told that within 2 to 3 years that borehole pays off for itself, and thereafter the water then that you're using is free. But how safe is that water? Is it as a good a quality as the water we're getting from Joburg Water?
We believe so, because then what the Borehole Association has told us is that once you, because obviously it is important that you get the right people to help you to install and drill your borehole for you, so that they can advise as to whether the water that you have in your borehole, what you can use it for. Some people have said that they use it for other things, for showering, for gardening, but then they'd use the municipal water to drink. So it obviously it differs for different people, but we then do recommend that you do get a reputable company to...
And possibly a good filter system.
Yes.
We're running out of time. One final question. If I have installed a borehole on my property, do I need to inform Johannesburg Water that I've now got a borehole and they shouldn't be billing me any longer? Or will that automatically, they notice that I'm not using their water and just stop billing me? What's the process there?
We don't do a registration of boreholes within the city of Johannesburg, but what would happen is that then automatically, as soon when they go read your meter, then they would see that there's something that's changed. Obviously, the number of kiloliters that you're using would have gone down. So then the billing, your bill will automatically go down.
But if the billing doesn't go down, then it is my responsibility as a consumer to inform you that I'm using borehole water.
Yes, definitely would
Finally,
advise that. Yeah.
Finally, your very important take-home message to consumers of water all around the country
is to use water wisely. Take cognizance of the amount of water you use, whether you're doing your gardening, taking a shower or bath, brushing your teeth. Be cognizant of the amount of water that you are using.
Be responsible.
Be responsible.
And there you have it, Eleanor from Joburg Water, telling us about the importance of being wise and respectful consumers of this amazingly important commodity in our lives, and that is water. Still to come, we're going to be talking to 4 Paws, and we're also going to be talking communicable diseases. So do stay with us, and remember, lines are open throughout the show. Great to have you on the show this morning, but time for an ad break.
Quality, quality, quality. That's what you can expect at Cairns. We select the best cuts. We stock the juiciest, most tender meats. Pre-made meals, making supper a breeze. Customer service that makes you feel right at home. Great quality meat doesn't just happen. So come to Cairns Meat, where service and quality matters.
Lot 100 Marhaba Gummies has the juiciest flavored gummies. Like fantasy gummies, new sour flavor now available. Fruit tube gummies in assorted blackcurrant and mango flavor. Asli snakes, sharks and bears. Sour bears and Lot 100 fruit flavored gummies with real fruit juice and vitamin C. Lot 100 gummies. Spice up your day. Taste it, you'll love it. Another quality product from Marhaba Trading.
Why did the chicken cross the road?
To be cooked by Exotic Foods, Durban's premier caterer.
Try tantalizing daily meals. Every day, a new delicious home-cooked meal to choose from, using the same fresh quality ingredients you and your family have come to expect.
Fresh halim and premium savories daily during Ramadan.
Quality has a name.
Exotic Food Caterers. Visit Mega Linen and give your house an international makeover with essential linen at local prices. Take 2 standard pillows for R39.95, Continental pillow from 60 Rand, Casa duvet inners from 79 Rand. Don't miss out on our essential bedroom deal from 629 Rand single bed, including duvet cover, duvet inner, fitted sheet, base wrap, standard pillow, Conti pillow. Choose from a variety of designs. Only at Mega Linen. Visit us at 148 Lansdowne Road, Jacobs, Durban, or our new store at 262 Stamford Hill Road, Durban. Mega Linen, that's the one.
All right, from water and scarce water resources all around the country, we now move to animals and the care and concern about not only domestic animals, but farm animals as well. Is it important? Why is it important? And why should we care? Well, Fiona Miles is here from 4 Paws, and she's going to unpack all of that for us in the interview. Fiona, good morning. Welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Lovely to have you here. And we're going to be talking about those defenseless little creatures. Some of them aren't that little. I think in the course of the interview, we're going to touch on lions and canned lions, or lion hunting, and just how passionate 4 Paws is about that issue. But before we get to all of that, who is Fiona Miles and what is 4 Paws all about?
Well, as I said, thank you for having me. 4 Paws is an international organization we operate around the world in 14 different countries. We operate in a global way. My responsibility at Four Paws is to head up the organisation in South Africa. So I'm the country director and have to sort of guide the organisation in the country.
So no doubt you're passionate, absolutely passionate about animals.
Absolutely.
Do you come from a veterinary background?
No, in fact, I had a big sort of passion to work with marine animals at first. So that's where my studies lay, and then did a lot of business studies, and finally had the opportunity to work for Four Paws, and sort of was able to combine the passion for animals as well as lead an organisation.
So how would Four Paws be different to the SPCA, who've been in the country and in Gauteng for ever and a day?
Four Paws works a little bit differently in that we're an animal welfare organisation that focuses on doing project work around the rescue of big cats and around the rescue of animals. We do a lot of campaign work, which of course the SPCA does as well, but they have the legal clout, so to say, because they're responsible for the implementation of the legislation. So we would work together with an organisation like SPCA.
Okay, now Four Paws, I know that you focus, like you say, on the larger animals, the big cats, etc. But what type of work do you do on farms? And are you seeing a lot of neglect and possibly cruelty as far as farm animals are concerned? So you're out of the domestic space, am I right? SPCA concentrates on the domestic areas.
We do as well, but we work largely from an educational point of view. So we partner with other organisations who do sterilisations, and we do the educational component of that to sort of enhance the work that happens, because one can sterilise continuously, but to actually make a change in the community, you actually have to come to the very root of where the problem lies, and that is in the population control and the education. In terms of farm animals, we work internationally on farm animals. There's a huge amount of campaigning that goes on to see end to large sort of mass cruelty. For instance, on the down feathers, for example, that are live plucked from geese.
Oh, no.
It's frightening what actually goes on. So we focus on sort of the large-scale production of animals and the cruelty that goes around that, and then raising awareness. And I think this is the key to everything that we do, is for people to really understand fundamentally what the animal has to go through, and then to make a conscious decision. So give us a couple
of examples, because, you know, we're talking high level here. Let's break it down so that people can really understand, you know, what you're focused on. I also know that you are very focused and want to try and bring to the attention to the general public the issue around battery eggs. So let's start at that point. You know, why is that a problem, and why should you be focusing on that? Because surely that's going to go to market. We're going to consume them. We need them. We need to consume them. And where's the problem?
The problem lies in the way that an animal is raised right from the beginning. And if that raising up of an animal is in suffering, of course, what are we consuming at the end of the day? So, for instance, I've been to some chicken farms where, when you have a look at the animal itself, it can't stand, it's been mass-produced in a way that we don't really understand as the consumer. So having a look at this...
As opposed to free range.
As opposed to the free range, an animal that lives a healthy, natural, normal, behavioural lifestyle for itself, where there's no antibiotics and other chemically induced things involved. So I think as consumers we need to understand where our food comes from. I think we need to understand what we're consuming. I think we need to be much more conscious and demanding of products that are good for us and that have come from a place of safety for those animals, because yes, we do consume animals and we do consume their products, but the life that they've had to lead in order for us to have that final product, we really need to question.
Sadly, in South Africa and many other parts of the world, and I'm not saying that it's justified, but food is expensive, and we have a very big working class and the poorer communities who are not able to afford the free-range chickens, eggs, etc., because that all the eco-friendly stuff comes at a cost. Yes. It's unaffordable for the poorer communities. What's the answer?
I think the answer lies a lot in the way in which we do things. You know, you get into the habit of consuming in a certain way and so on. Whereas I think a lot goes around education, and if people had more availability to fresh and natural products that provide the same nutritious needs, I think we could go a lot without some of those, or as much of some of those products as what we consume on a very large scale at the moment. So just by reducing and thinking and taking care about, I think just in reduction, and that's what 4 Paws promotes internationally, is a look at our own behaviour, a look at what we need, and is it really needed for such a high quantity versus what we, so by reducing, by perhaps accessing other forms of nutrition, we could make a difference in the lives of many animals.
And there is a problem around food wastage, which is an interview that I am planning on doing sometime soon. But the other red flag that came up for me whilst you were talking was the issue around antibiotics in the chickens. What's that all about? You know, why are we pumping antibiotics into chickens? Because eventually it's going to end up in our guts.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I suppose that's why they say chicken soup is good for you. I think it's more about, once again, the mass production. So I'm certainly not an expert whatsoever on that side of things, but what I understand from mass production is that there needs to be a huge and sort of large-scale production in order to meet the demand. And this is why we need to reduce. So I'm not familiar with all the contents that are pushed into animals and hormones and so on to get them bigger, faster, to get them to our shelves, but that's something we should think about. Just like with everything we do, we should be more conscious. So we need
to think carefully of what and how we're ingesting stuff. All right, we're going to talk canned lions and more, but right after the ad break. Stay with us. Fiona Miller from 4 Paws is our guest. If you have any questions or comments, lines are open. We're waiting to hear from you. Fiona Miles from 4 Paws is our guest. We're talking about looking out for our furry friends. They don't have a voice, and if we don't take care of them, then they are going to just curl up and die. And that's literally what will happen. And I think, again, we spoke about water, the responsibility of water usage. This too, looking after our domestic and farm animals, is a responsibility that we need to take on. They're part of our lives, they're part of our environment, and it's up to you and I to make a difference. Fiona's going to tell us more about the neglect and the cruelty to animals. Now, something else that you're pretty passionate about is the whole issue around canned lions. What on earth is that all about? And why should we be concerned? Why should we be lending our voice to this campaign?
I think if one thinks about a lion, you have this immediate impression that there's this great big majestic king of the jungle with the loud roar, which can be heard over 10 kilometers and more. And what's actually happening with lions in the country, where we've been told that there's enough lions and that they're safe and that they're not on the brink of extinction, is actually untrue. Because what we're doing in this country, and which is perfectly legal at this stage, is we are intensively breeding lions like in a very rapid way. So in South Africa, there's more than 8,000 lions on over 200 breeding farms, and those lions are being put into the situation where, when they're small, they are available for cuddling and interaction and cub petting. Later on, they go.
Is that not good? Is that not kind of cute and good as far as our children are concerned?
Sounds
because
like
I'm thinking circuses, I'm thinking zoos, I'm thinking as an outing, an exposure, you know, for children to animals of the wild.
So if one thinks about it, yes, to have that interaction with an animal gives you some sort of immediate gratification because you've interacted with that animal. But the question one has to ask yourself is, what happens to that cub when he gets big? Or when she gets big, what happens to them? They don't just sort of stay in a natural environment afterwards. So oftentimes they're then put back into the breeding cycle, or they're sold on later on for hunting. And that hunting happens in a very confined area where they've been released from a breeding system into a confined area for a short space of time. So they're basically just a target. And so the hunt is very quick. It can be quite rapid. It's not really a fair chase between hunter and predator, and And we're selling that as a natural thing that happens. And so what we're not presenting to the world is our natural heritage and our natural environment as it truly should be.
So the resources that's being spent in canned, and that's what it's called, canned hunting, canned lions, could be better utilized, tourist resources obviously, because we need the tourists coming into the country and spending their money, can be utilized in other natural and more beautiful areas of the country.
Absolutely. And I think this is where, again, education forms such a big role. If people knew what happened to that little cute cub that you cuddled, and you think that later on in a couple of years' time it's going to be a trophy on somebody's wall, it's really quite disconcerting, because you're basically paying money to cuddle that cub whilst it's going to end up on somebody's wall later after also a huge expense. So we need to be responsible tourists, yes.
Shouldn't we then be targeting the owners of those breeding farms or small holdings rather than going on this massive drive and maybe not even get through or get the message across?
I think it's not there's no one way to do it. I think it needs to have many different angles. One is, as you say, through direct dialogue with people who are intensively breeding these animals. But the other way is, of course, through legislation, which should put much higher protection on the animals, as well as through tourism and through education. A lot of people come to South Africa to volunteer to raise these animals unwittingly. They don't know what they're doing, in fact. And so I think it needs to be an overall approach. And there should be some real moratorium on breeding so that we're not intensively breeding our wildlife.
If there's a ban that's been placed on canned lion hunting, how big a hole is it going to make in the tourism income, South Africa's tourism income?
I think with the value on a live lion is much higher than the value on a dead one, because that's a once-off purchase. Please excuse me. So the value lies in the life of the lion for as long as possible, and not the once-off trophy hunt. Sorry.
Okay, you've got a frog in your throat. Let's give you a minute to have a drink of water. I'm talking to Fiona Miller. We're talking canned lion hunting. She's from an organisation called 4 Paws. We touched on the issue around domestic and farm animals, and now we're talking tourism and the impact on the tourist industry into South Africa if we do not have attractive enough recreational activities as far as wild animals are concerned. How big a role do our national parks play? And is there a place for circuses and zoos in South Africa?
Oh, sorry, the frog has come back.
Oh, I know that. It's terrible. I have the same problem. And sometimes on air, I have this coughing spasm and then I just can't carry on. But are you good to go? Another sip of water? Are you fine? Okay, you heard my question.
Yes, I did. And I think zoos obviously have a role to play. They do have... there are some very good zoos. They have scientific research around animals.
So you don't say no to good zoos, like Johannesburg Zoo and Pretoria Zoo?
Excuse me. Yes. To the fact that there are some very good, reputable zoos around the world that do a lot of work to support animals. There's, of course, many who don't. And circuses, on the other hand, are forcing animals to perform very unnaturally, doing things that they wouldn't normally do in very confined spaces. So their whole life is lived in a very unnatural way. So we're very much against circuses and those animals. And I think at the end of the day, we have to consider that a wild animal really belongs in the wild.
Absolutely. In closing, what do you have to say to our viewers this morning?
I think to be a responsible tourist, whether you're from South Africa or from anywhere else around the world, when you want to experience this country, you want to experience the wildlife in its true environment, in its true way, and not in an unauthentic way. So what's presented sometimes to tourists is very different from what is authentic. And so to be a responsible tourist, a responsible consumer, a responsible pet owner, means that you have the responsibility and you actually follow that through. the change, even though it might be small, or each person doing that, can make such a huge difference to so many animals all around the world, that we'd actually see a vast improvement for animals.
And obviously animal lovers and concerned citizens, if they'd like to make a difference, could contribute generously to Four Paws.
Absolutely.
All they need is to go to your website. Anything else in closing you'd like to say to us?
I think, yes, in closing, for people to maybe come to our sanctuary, which is called Lions Rock, which is based in Bethlehem in the Free State. It's a beautiful sanctuary where we've rescued over 101 big cats. It's very costly to take care of those animals, but just to see how an animal who's been rescued from a circus or a zoo or private keeping or canned hunting has actually come out of that captive environment and can flourish in their own environment, and to learn more about these creatures in a way that one doesn't get to see them anymore. So for your viewers to visit Lions Rock in the Free State would be an incredible experience.
And all of that information is available on your website.
It's all available on our website, 4-paws.org.za.
Lovely talking to you, and keep the flag flying high for our furry friends who do not have a voice for themselves, and continue being that strong voice of reason. Lovely to have you in the studio, and all the very best.
Thanks so much.
That was Fiona Miller talking to us about canned lions and our responsibility as far as our domestic and farm animals are concerned. Right after this ad break, we're going to be talking about communicable diseases. We're entering the summer months, and no doubt a lot of us are going to go on holiday to very rural areas. What do we need to know? How do we protect ourselves? And how do we make certain that we don't bring all of those communicable diseases back to our homes and our neighborhoods? Stay with us. Bismillah, and we're into the final segment of the show this morning. We touched on water, our responsibility to water, and then, of course, our responsibility to our furry friends, the animals in our lives, in our neighborhoods, and in our communities, and just what it is that we need to be aware of as far as the issue is concerned on canned lions and cruelty to animals as well. So I think that's got us thinking this morning, has it not? Another important thing that we need to highlight is communicable diseases. And I know there was a bit of an outcry a couple of months ago when we did the interview on measles and the vaccines around measles. So we're going to look at that once again because it is an important issue, and we're going to look at other at-risk communicable diseases on the show this morning. So let's welcome our guest, and she is Dr. Kerrigan McCarthy. Morning, welcome to the show.
Morning, Julie, and to your listeners and viewers.
Lovely to have you here, and it's important what we're unpacking this morning, is it not?
Absolutely.
But before we get there, tell us about your role in as far as communicable diseases are concerned. Whom do you represent sitting with me in the studio this morning?
So I work with the National Institute for Communicable Diseases. I'm the head of the Outbreak Response Unit. And the National Institute for Communicable Diseases is the reference laboratory centre of the National Health Laboratory Service. So we do specialist diagnostics, and we also do surveillance for diseases of public health importance. And when these happen to cause outbreaks, then our centre, the Outbreak Response Unit, is in a position to give the National Department of Health, members of the public, journalists such as yourselves, information both to prevent outbreaks and also to contain and curb them when they do happen.
And the what to do. So This is what you need to do. We're going to touch, about 3 months ago, we had a measles outbreak. I'm correct in saying about 3 months ago, and people were very nervous about it. And then there was issues around vaccines. We'll get to that in a minute. Should we be worried about measles? Has that been contained, or is there a further outbreak?
So, Julie, the outbreak of measles that happened in Gauteng in about July was contained. However, subsequently, measles has broken out in KwaZulu-Natal, and there is at present an outbreak in the Durban area with a few other districts also involved, Pietermaritzburg and Ilembe district, which is the Stanger area.
Why do we have these sporadic outbreaks all around the country? I mean, we contained it in July or shortly after that. Why? What goes wrong, or what happens down the line that we then see further outbreaks further down the line?
So, Julie, there are two main reasons why there are measles outbreaks. The first is vaccination is the 100% best prevention against measles. And it's very difficult to vaccinate 100% of children all the time. And for various reasons, such as access to clinics or socioeconomic factors, sometimes the health service runs out of vaccine, very rarely. But all these things make it very difficult to get what we call 100% coverage. Then there's another reason why vaccination coverage is not 100%, and that is because some persons, for ideological or religious reasons, choose not to vaccinate their families members. And this is where these latest outbreaks have in fact occurred. And this is one of the reasons why there has been renewed interest in discussion around the topic of vaccination.
Now, 3 months ago when we did this show, obviously we had a very concerned listener call in, and she questioned the vaccines because as Muslims, obviously we do not ingest gelatin or any porcine products, and I know certain medicines and vaccines do contain porcine. So we as Muslims are not allowed to obviously ingest or take those products. Is there a relatively safe or equally safe alternative for the Muslim community?
So thank you for your question. Perhaps I should start off first by explaining the context of how this vaccination landed up in the public sector. In about 2014, if not earlier, the manufacturer of the measles vaccine at that stage indicated to the South African government that it would no longer be producing its vaccine. It was called Ruvax. And the South African government had to go all over the world to try and find another suitable measles vaccine. Now, one of the problems is that the global community is moving towards a combination vaccine to measles together with rubella, and there are very few manufacturers in the world left that produce a measles-only vaccine, which is what our country currently uses.
So can't we use the combination?
We could, but one of the difficulties is that introducing a measles and rubella vaccination requires an enormous amount of coordinated effort, because rubella is not currently vaccinated or preventable through vaccine in the South African context. And if we introduce the vaccine suddenly, we may increase the cases of rubella and then land up with congenital rubella syndrome, and we don't want that. So eventually a vaccine was found, and unfortunately it contained porcine gelatine. And it is currently one of 2 vaccines registered in South Africa for measles. The other is an MMR, measles, mumps and rubella vaccine, which is only available in the private sector at a charge. And this vaccine does not contain porcine gelatine. So it leaves many within the Muslim community with a very hard choice. Either a free measles vaccine offered by the government, which contains porcine gelatine, or a measles vaccine in the private sector called Priorix, which contains MMR but has to be bought at a person's own cost. Now, the difficulty was encountered early on by government and public health services, and there was extensive engagement with a number of Islamic bodies. The Jamiat Ulama, and you'll have
Jamiat Ulama.
Thank you. Was approached and in fact issued a statement indicating that in the absence of other alternatives, it was acceptable to take this vaccine. And then the Islamic Medical Association has also been engaging proactively with communities and has come out in support of the vaccine. So
however, you're going to have a lot of people who are not still comfortable taking that vaccine. So the alternative is to then go to the private sector. And what sort of cost are we looking at? per vaccine?
I would not like to say on air because I'm not entirely familiar with the costs.
Guesstimate 100 to 300
Perhaps
rands?
300 rand in that.
Just to give people an idea that there is the alternative and it's going to sit well with the larger Muslim community, because I too would rather go that route. I'd cut out on some luxury in my life for that month and have my kids vaccinated, and also know, comforted in the knowledge that it is a halal vaccine.
Correct.
All right, we need to look at other communicable diseases as well. The summer months around the corner, people are going to be doing extensive travel locally and internationally. And let's look at the risks that they put themselves, and when they come back from holiday, the risk that they carry with them as far as diseases are concerned. I'm talking to Dr. Kerrigan McCarthy. We're talking communicable diseases. We have finally and hopefully put the whole issue of the measles vaccine at rest. It is available in the private sector, the halal one, the one that does not contain the porcine gelatin. And inshallah, I don't think it's too terribly expensive, about between 300 to 500 rand per vaccine. And if that's the route that you opt to go, inshallah, then do know that that's the cost that you're going to pay. Lots more to come right after the ad break. Do stay with us. Bismillah, and we are talking to Dr. Kerrigan McCarthy. She is from the Institute of Communicable Diseases right here in South Africa. We touched on the whole issue around measles, and she has indicated that, alhamdulillah, we here in Gauteng have contained the measles outbreak in July of this year, but it has now reared its ugly head in KZN, Pietermaritzburg and surrounding areas. And she's also reassured the Muslim community that there is a halal vaccine available in the private sector, a halal measles vaccine, which is available in the private sector. All you need to do is just speak to your doctor, your healthcare professional, and they will make arrangements to make it available to you. But of course, it does come at a cost. Now, Dr. Kerrigan, as far as other communicable diseases concerned, I'm not sure if weather plays a role at all, but we are coming into the summer months. We've also heard Rand Water or Johannesburg Water telling us that we're going to get our rain pretty late this summer, only in January or February. So I'm kind of thinking that there's a risk to us as well, as far as possibly hohos and, diseases and all these outbreaks are concerned. What else are we at risk apart from the measles? We hope that it gets contained in KZN, but what other risk are we? I'm thinking malaria as well.
So malaria in the summer months in the low-lying parts of South Africa, that's Limpopo and Mpumalanga and KwaZulu-Natal, is a big concern. And in fact, over March and April, we saw what we would call an outbreak of malaria in Limpopo province. It was late in the season because, again, of late rains and heavy rainfall. The mosquito population grew enormously, and as a consequence, we had an unprecedented number of malaria cases from the Limpopo province compared with the previous years. So, in fact, we're anticipating an early start to the malaria season this year. So travellers or residents in low-lying areas where malaria has occurred in the past need to be extra cautious.
Even residents, let's assume, the small towns in those areas, would you caution people in those areas to get themselves vaccinated? And if not, if they do come down with malaria, how does it present and what are the risks to them?
So malaria prevention is in essence twofold. It's first about prevention of mosquito bites, and second about chemoprophylaxis, in other words, drugs, anti-malaria drugs that you can take preemptively to prevent development of infection should you get bitten by an infected mosquito. So it would be appropriate for people who live in the area to make sure that mosquitoes can't live in and around puddles of water around their house, to sleep under mosquito nets, to use mosquito prevention, tabard and the like on open areas of exposed skin, and to cover at dawn and dusk, to cover their skin through long sleeves and to avoid mosquito bites as far as possible. Travellers to areas where there are mosquitoes may want to take chemoprophylaxis, and you should consult your pharmacist. There's a whole variety of drugs that can be taken. In terms of signs and symptoms, malaria presents very much like flu, influenza, initially with body aches and pains, a little bit of diarrhea, high fevers that remit. In other words, there's a high fever tonight and the next morning someone feels better. So anyone who has travelled to a malaria area, to those affected areas that I mentioned, and returns with these symptoms should not confuse these symptoms with influenza. We're still in the middle of the flu season, and malaria is a concern in returning travellers. A person should present to their health practitioner and have a malaria test done. If symptoms persist, it would be very important to repeat that malaria test. Sometimes in the early stages, the malaria tests can be negative.
We talk communicable diseases, but obviously I guess the question is malaria contagious like measles, for example?
So good question. Malaria is unlike measles. Measles is transmitted through droplet spread from person to person through coughing and sneezing. Malaria is transmitted through the bite of an infected mosquito.
Ooh.
And so, of course, the dynamics between mosquito populations and human populations really determine whether or not malaria can be transmitted. And this is why the areas in South Africa, the low-lying areas of Mpumalanga, KwaZulu-Natal, are not endemic for malaria, but they have seasonal malaria. In other words, when the temperatures get warm, like we're going to see in summer now, and the mosquito populations grow. And if a few mosquitoes become infected with malaria, then it starts the cycle of transmission between mosquitoes and humans, and we land up with an exponential increase in cases in the summer months.
Is it deadly? Can people die from malaria?
Absolutely. Untreated Plasmodium falciparum malaria is fatal and needs to be diagnosed and treatment initiated as soon as possible.
What other communicable diseases should we be concerned about?
In South Africa, the biggest communicable disease that we struggle with as a society is tuberculosis. So tuberculosis is transmitted through droplet secretions,
again,
through
coughing and sneezing, etc.
Right. And unfortunately, tuberculosis is rather difficult to diagnose because in many people it presents with a very slow, gentle onset. It's not like malaria where one comes down the next day with a fever and body aches and pains. One generally starts coughing and losing weight and sweating at night time. And these symptoms herald the onset of tuberculosis, and usually it progresses for a few weeks before a person realizes, actually, I'm not well, and presents to a clinic where a sputum test can diagnose TB.
And that's highly contagious, is it not?
Unfortunately, tuberculosis is highly contagious. And so it would be very important to make a diagnosis early and to present to a healthcare service early. So if anyone is coughing or sweating at night or losing weight, so easy to go to one's healthcare provider and insist on a sputum test for TB.
Now, we spoke initially about measles, and we've spoken about the importance of the vaccine, to be vaccinated against measles. Are there vaccines available for malaria and TB?
So we're at the cutting edge of research if we talk about vaccines for TB and malaria. Unfortunately, there are no active and 100% effective vaccines for tuberculosis. There is the BCG vaccine, which is given at birth, and this vaccine is shown to prevent childhood tuberculosis and TB meningitis and disseminated TB in children under the age of 5. It is not as effective, unfortunately, at preventing adult TB, and that's where the cutting-edge research is at the moment. In fact, South Africa is on the leading edge of this and is conducting research trials into TB vaccines. Malaria vaccines, there was a successful trial in East Africa done last year, but this is still in its infancy and it's not available in public.
Let's wrap up the interview by going right back to measles. If I opt not to give my child the vaccine or any other vaccine, for example, there are religious groups who are of the belief that any vaccine, not necessarily measles, any vaccine for that matter, if given to a child, the child's going to present with autism or causes autism in the child. Let's look at those two issues in wrapping up.
Thank you. Vaccination is a very sensitive issue, and I think my role as a scientist is to offer some scientific information for consideration for anyone who wants to make that decision. The imperative for vaccination from a scientific level is threefold. First, for protection of the individual. Second, for protection of the community. And third, for protection of the globe. At an individual level, untreated or measles has no cure and no treatment. There's only prevention. And the complications of measles are severe. 6% of children who get measles may land up with pneumonia and even in ICU, and around 1 to 2% can die. Then there's a complication of measles called encephalitis, which happens in about 1 in 1,000 persons who have measles. And there's an even more severe complication called SSPE, in which a progressive encephalitis or brain infection happens, which can leave a person permanently scarred. Then measles...
Permanently scarred as in?
Mentally damaged, neurological signs and symptoms.
Okay.
Then measles also causes an immunosuppression for about 6 months to a few years after measles, leaving children more vulnerable to other infectious diseases. And so it's been shown in communities that the all-cause mortality decreases following the implementation of measles vaccine. So those are the individual benefits. At a community level, certain age groups suffer more and have a higher mortality for measles than others. So young children and older people, and then also people who have decreased access to care, the poor amongst us who can't go to hospital immediately through lack of funding or lack of access. And these folk have a higher mortality. If, however, there's sufficient immunity within a community, measles will not spread. And so measles vaccination is not just for ourselves, it's also for the broader community around us, and particularly those vulnerable people who, unlike us, may not have access to care. And then lastly, at a global level, measles is targeted for eradication. It's one of very few organisms that only infects humans. It does not infect animals. And so, like smallpox was eradicated in the 1960s and 70s, measles is possible to eradicate. And that will be an immense cost saving for the entire community. And it's something that we as South Africa within the SADC region have been targeting to eliminate naturally occurring measles, not imported measles, by 2020. And there's a role that all of us can play in this, and that's primarily through measles prevention, through vaccination. So that's the information that I would offer to people who are considering whether or not vaccination is something that they would like to take up.
Would you say that if measles presents in older people, it's more deadly?
Absolutely. Measles in persons over the age of 30 has a higher mortality than children over the age of 1.
Let's get to the theory of vaccinations is the direct cause of autism in children. As a scientist, how do you debunk that myth? If it is a myth.
Yes. You know, unfortunately, that was a piece of research that came into the public domain that was subsequently found to have been funded by an anti-vaccination lobby. And that was the first alarm bell that rang about that piece of information. Then, of course, it caused a lot of interest among scientists because no one would want to be responsible for giving a child something that to prevent a disease that would then cause a side effect. And so a lot of work and effort was done by scientists across the globe to look at the incidence rates of autism and the causal pathways that are understood presently, both through measles vaccination, measles complications, and autism. And it was established at a numerical level through statistics that this is unlikely, if not impossible. And as more information becomes available, it has become clearer that this is not the cause of autism. Of course, the anti-vaccination lobby will speak to this and often speak to the emotive person who is making the choice to vaccinate. And to this, we always offer the very tangible risks of the complications of measles. So if one chooses not to vaccinate, one then runs the risk, which are far greater, of complications from measles disease itself. And as I shared, these can be death, pneumonia, ICU admission, meningitis and encephalitis.
And of course, that is all we have time for. Thank you so much for your expertise on the show this morning.
Wonderful to talk to you.
That was Dr. Kerrigan McCarthy talking to us about measles and other communicable diseases. And that brings us to the end of the show this morning. Do hope you've enjoyed that. Do hope that you found it informative enough. Until Wednesday morning, it's of course a long weekend. Heritage Day tomorrow. Think about your heritage. What does it mean for you, and what are you going to do? Heritage Day is tomorrow, but we're enjoying a public holiday on Monday. So if you are on the roads, please take care, and see you on Wednesday as usual. And it is, as always, a big thank you from the Let's Talk production team, and Khuda Hafiz from me, Julie Alli.
Ya hala, ya hala, ya hala. حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا، حن قلبي على جمعة الخير.